have a very exciting topic to talk about. It's going to be around our famous FEP, Fujitsu Enterprise Postgres, and we're going to cover today more details of our new messaging, our new approach to Postgres, and also highlight some of the new functionality, new features that we bring into the market with our new release. So this is the agenda we have today. It's not a dense agenda. We're going to cover a little bit and talk about open source. What's the Fujitsu role into open source? The things that we have done, our contributions in general. Then we're going to jump into Postgres, SQL, and talk again about the contributions from Fujitsu there. And then I'm going to tie that up with talking about hybrid cloud security. So for those who are actually tuned in into the presentations we have done in the past, our focus have been mainly around security and enterprise functionality, but we're bringing that to the next level, which is really seeing a lot of traction in terms of how folks in the market are actually deploying databases, especially Postgres. So Postgres is playing a key vital role into this multi-cloud architecture. And we're going to just talk a little bit about how do we see the market and how we can actually address some of the issues. Finally, I will introduce you and announce officially our FEP version 15 availability. We're going to wrap up with a few questions, hopefully you might have, and then I will also invite you for our next webinars at that point. So for those who are joining us for the first time, you might not know anything about Fujitsu. I know some of our colleagues in the market have heard us talking about our contributions around Postgres, but one thing we always want to start talking about and highlight for our audience is Fujitsu is not a new player into the open source market, right? We have actually done a significant amount of contributions around open source in general, and that is not limited to just open source database, which is an area of expertise for us. So we have, of course, a lot of expertise around enterprise database development, but we also have a very strong heritage in terms of contributing back to open source projects, especially Linux development. As you can see here, we are a platinum member of a Cloud Native Computing Foundation. We are also founding member of a container initiative. We are a key contributor to the Postgres community as well. And one of the things that we always proud of and we usually highlight is we have one of the fellows that sit on the Linux Foundation board. Yoshia Ito it's a Fujitsu employee, and he has been part of the Linux Foundation from the beginning. So we always like to start with highlighting, hey, this is not something we just start doing. We didn't realize that open source is a way to innovate in the last few years. We're actually doing this for a while, and that's part of our a key core competence when it comes to Postgres. So now how we tie that back to Postgres. So when we combine our enterprise commercial database development expertise and we tie that to our open source affinity and bring that back to, hey, Fujitsu is a company providing IT support, IT services capabilities globally. When we combine all of those three components, we do have a strong competency to deliver to the client's excellence around what they can actually achieve using Postgres. So when we started contributing to community Postgres, it was not something as significant as it is today, but over time, we were able to realize, hey, this is really a way to unlock innovation, not just for ourselves, Fujitsu, but also for our clients, and allow our clients to transform and to really embrace transformations within their IT landscape. And of course, as any company, we're trying to find market opportunities where we can capitalize some of our investment, right? And we see a strong push in adoption around Postgres across pretty much all the industries. With all the clients that we interact, we see this paradigm shift from clients looking into move away from traditional monolithic applications and databases. And to some extent, a lot has been done on the application side. Now, containerization, microservices, this is no longer something new. So everybody takes that actually as the new standard. But from a database perspective, only now we're really seeing a lot of traction in terms of organizations considering, hey, I did all this work on my application side. How do I take the next step and actually also implement this new architecture for my databases, right? And that's basically where we see organizations are just looking for not just, hey, I need the newest and the greatest new thing. It's really about how can I achieve greater agility with a lower cost. So that pushes the organizations to consider new models, and that's where we actually see the market opportunity, the growth, exponential growth we see on Postgres and the adoption. Right, it's really on the right hand of this picture. Companies adopting multiple cloud solutions, uh, uh, multiple types of hybrid clouds, and then now really trying to embed the database into that conversation, right? And a lot of folks also realizing now that, hey, the cloud native databases are not the solution for everything. We still need to rely on relational databases. All the discipline that we learn about how we optimize data access, how do we optimize performance to access data, that's still all valid in the cloud. It's just how we deploy and how we architect the database and on those scenarios, right? And that's where we see a lot of our clients and partners are in this journey. So we're going to see them, some of them more on the right hand side, some of them still in the very beginning with a lot of monolithic applications trying to move to the right, and some of them like in the middle. And this is also a chart on the left that folks looking into open source database should be familiar, right? Multiple blogs, multiple analysts have highlighted the phenomenon of, hey, open source databases have now eclipsed the commercial licensed databases, and the trend, it doesn't seem to be a blip. So we see now that the actually it's accelerating. So there's more and more adoption of open source in contrast to commercial databases. And one of the key reasons, in our opinion, it's what we presented on the previous slide. But when you combine that with another interesting fact, you have a lot of challenges to address, right? So you have a lot of regulatory compliance coming into place. Some of those are no longer new. Again, GDPR is something most of the companies that do global business have to comply with. And then we have a few ones that are industry specific, but the net message of it is we have to ensure compliance to those regulatory bodies. And at the same time, how do we do that without compromising agility? And we see this adoption. So we have this challenge to address, and that's one of the things that we have as central in our thinking when we think about FEP. So for us and on the FEP side, it's really how can we take the best of open source and combine with the best of what we can provide from a hybrid multi-cloud point of view. So how can we make FEP more scalable, more portable, more secure without compromising the community activity we get from Postgres, the innovation that you get when you have multiple folks contributing freely into a community of open source code, and then the flexibility as well that allows you to not have one single company behind dictating the direction of a specific technology. So for us, it's really how we combine those two pieces to really leverage this strong and robust offer for our clients. And in all that context, right, we saw in 2000. 2019 is actually when the first time we saw the open source databases taking off. We see a lot of clients adopting open source because of a hyperscalers pushing in that direction, and of course because of the flexibility, the agility, the cost that clients can uh, realize from that. But the more and more we see clients looking into, okay, I adopted on the cloud, I adopted on-prem, but I do really need to consider a hybrid approach. And when we start talking about hybrid approach, especially from a data point of view, all of those key things that we see almost on a daily basis, right, are also front and center. So it's no longer just about compliance. It's also how do I protect myself against data breach? How do I protect myself against fraud, uh, ransomwares, phishing attacks, interruption of operations? So all those things become uh, central as well. So you need to juggle between being compliant with a significant amount of regulations, but also focusing on how do I protect my company against all these threats, all this cyber crime activity happening in the market right now. Um, so much so in the last few years, one of the things that Fujitsu realized is one of our key focus areas, not just on FEP, but Fujitsu as an organization, it's really to provide consulting and capabilities and services around the hybrid work, the new hybrid work style. So that also have increased significantly all the risks that we had before on the web in itself, right? So now we have folks bringing corporate laptops and working from home full time or in a hybrid fashion. So that also enhances the cyber crime activity because there's a lot more that needs to be considered in those types of environments. And then tying back to compliance, right? It's how do I make sure from a database point of view that I can avoid regulatory fines, for example, which are not only impacting my organization from a financial point of view, but also impacting from a trust point of view, right? So it's not only about how much money we're going to lose paying the fine, is also how much trust we're going to lose if we have data compromise. We have a lot of examples of this in the market, and we could find probably one a week if we look in a global scale, a company that got data exposed, and of course created some bad tasting from their client base point of view. Um, the regulatory part, it's going to continue to increase more and more. The regulatory bars will be more sophisticated and will require companies to achieve highest levels of a data protection, right? So it becomes really how can I actually leverage compliance to turn that some of the investments that have been made into value for my base. So when we put all of those points together, that's something that we had as central in our thinking on how we actually bring the best solution, the best Postgres solution to the market. And with that, that leads us into the announcement we have to do today, which is today we're making available Fujitsu Enterprise Postgres version 15, which really focus on being the hybrid multi-cloud Postgres you can rely on. Uh, And if you were familiar with the focus areas that we had before, some of this will still be the same. We're just adding functionality on top of that to really allow you to give the next step into a hybrid multi-cloud journey, right? So security still paramount. We are the first Postgres out there to offer transparent data encryption, and despite of what you might hear in the market, this solution actually have been available since our version 9 to our clients. So our clients are actively encrypting data and protecting their they, their users and clients through transparent data encryption, data masking, and and all the other security functionalities that we had before. We're bringing that to a next level, and I'll show you just a list of some of those functionalities on the next slide. We have enhanced our DevOps approach. So we have been focused a lot on the Kubernetes side of things. We also expanding that. So now no longer we just support OpenShift, we support Rancher and multiple platforms. So when we talk about a multi-cloud environment, we see clients wanting, willing to put everything on a hyperscaler, but other clients want to use a mix of power architecture, uh, S390 architecture, which is the IBM Z platform, and of course, Intel is the x86 architectures are prevalent out there. So we do support all of those and allow clients to optimize and operationalize things in a more DevSecOps oriented way. Reliability is a key and central. If you're operating in a multi-cloud environment, you want to make sure you can do data replication, high availability, and other high availability deployments. In terms of portability, we keep our focus on keeping full compatibility with the community Postgres. So everything we're putting on top, we're trying to put it on top without having to force our clients to be locked in. And we see that's not really the approach of all the other vendors in the market. And usability, which is a key focus, right? As you adopt more cloud options, the more complex it becomes for you to manage your environment from all points of view, right? Not just from a UI perspective, but how you manage keys, for example, how you guarantee you have the right instances encrypted, and etc. Finally, performance, a key thing for us. So clients that are adopting Postgres, some of them are adopting because of performance. Postgres is well known for its performance, and we again improve upon it and deliver extra performance functionality. So this is an extensive list of some of our additional functionality. You see some of those are existing functionality, but we bring in a few new things. For example, in security, we have something called confidentiality management, which basically simplifies how you apply a role-based access control to your settings in auditing controls. So you basically now, instead of doing one by one manually, we allow you to do that in more bulk type of operations and simplifying the overall management of audit operations, for example. Separation of duty. So now we have additional capabilities within database that really isolate the function of the DBA and the function of the security admin, which allows you to have a more granular control of who can see the data, which optimizes your data protection, your data posture when you are in a cloud environment. And then we have other things around compliance again. So we have extra automated alerts that will learn your patterns, will learn your configurations in terms of audit logs, that will send you logs even if you haven't set up that way. They will learn and send some information through automation in terms of somebody's tampering with some configuration, or somebody is trying to access the database without authorization. Finally, we could not forget about key management in the cloud. So now we bring in a broad support to KMS on the cloud. So think about all the KMS out there available in the hyperscale. So we're now officially supporting most of them. And looking into the future, we want to support all the top 10 KMSs out there from a cloud perspective. So we have improved our operator. So for those who are deploying on Kubernetes clusters, we do have an operator for Postgres, and we have optimized our own version, right? So we gain something between a 25 to 30% more in performance in how we do our operations and how we do the deployment of the operator in itself. So it's a significant gain. So for those familiar, we have done a lot of optimization for the high-end platforms. Like think about S390 power architecture. So we actually have done even more here in terms of optimizing and getting a little bit more extra performance out of those. From a platform point of view and usability, we're bringing Red Hat RHEL 9, and also Rancher. We're now officially supporting the Z platform for those folks leveraging Rancher. And those are the key new things that we bring into the platform. And finally, just in the DevSecOps, we also allowing now the ability to extend our container image to allow folks to put extra open source products into that image. So this is a list. Of course, when you go back to this, you'll be able to see what's coming to what platform. As you can see, we have pretty much all the top platforms available in the market in terms of a CPU architecture. And to summarize all we discussed, this is really where we see the Fujitsu advantage. So it's really bringing this open source compatibility, this open source focus on how we keep things compatible. How do we allow the community to thrive? How do we keep investing in the community? So we actually we have more than ever increase our size of contribution teams. So we have more folks actually giving back to the community. And we're combining that with, again, our laser focus on hybrid multi-cloud deployments, right? We really focus on how clients can leverage Postgres in their cloud journey, whatever that might be. It's on-prem, it's on a public cloud, it's a mix of both. So we really focusing a lot on that. Finally, you saw when I announced, I said the Postgres you can rely on. So we recognize the Fujitsu brand has a lot of power in terms of risk mitigation for our clients, right? So a lot of the big clients, they do need a reassurance that if they start in the journey of using an open source to be their core technology for databases, they will need a company that can actually understand their language, then it can actually go on the journey with them to really help them to adopt and mitigate risk when using open source. And finally, cost reduction. Anyone that have used commercial databases out there will be familiar, but also we see a new trend as well. A lot of folks have embraced pure database as a service without having a lot of consideration on the cloud, and now they're realizing that might actually become more costly for the organization than they actually initially predicted. So these are the key points for us in terms of our advantage. So I hoped this was a very informative session for you. And now I'll hand it over to you, Matt, for us to maybe have a few questions.
Thanks so much, Marcos. And thanks for taking us through that. Seems like the product's really transitioning to sort of meet the needs of the security and compliance side, and some very interesting pieces around the DevOps side of things as well. We've got some really good questions that have come through, so I'll pop those up. The first one's come through from Dylan. Dylan, how does this differ from Cosmos DB for Postgres SQL?
That's an interesting question. Of course, this is a public webinar. I won't get too much into Cosmos DB in itself, but I'll highlight this is an enterprise version of Postgres. So it's really a native Postgres with built-in functionality. So it's really designed for enterprises. You might not have heard about Fujitsu before, because most of our clients are in Japan, and this was restricted to the Japanese channel for us, right? So that's why you probably haven't heard it. But this was built. It's a native Postgres built from the ground up to support enterprises. So all the functionalities that I listed, of course, I didn't have time to get into all the details. But when you think about transparent data encryption, that's built into our enterprise version of Postgres. Or since you're talking about Cosmos DB, you might be looking into high availability or even performance, right? So we have a few functionalities like VCI, which allows you to get a little bit extra performance out of a traditional deployment of Postgres, or high availability function as well, right? So I hope this addressed your question around Cosmos DB. But if you want to know more, you can always, of course, reach out to our team of Postgres experts. You see the link on the last slide. You can go there and submit a request. We would be glad to address your questions in more details. Hopefully that helps.
Great, Marcos. And then this one comes through from Julian. Do you offer a single pane of glass for simultaneous deployment and monitoring of Postgres data, he meant to say data, on premise and across multiple CSPs?
Um, that's an interesting question as well. We don't offer a single plane from the perspective of, hey, you log into this UI and then you can deploy to any cloud vendor. Mostly because we would need to put all the credentials of the cloud vendors in there. So we're not operating that way. So the way we actually looking into this is more from a containers and Kubernetes point of view. That's really our focus when we talk about multi-cloud. So we're not talking about a DBaaS solution combined with an on-prem solution, combined with a Kubernetes solution, which is an approach some of our colleagues in the market are actually using. Our view of clients really embracing multi-cloud is really around Kubernetes. So, yeah.
Great. And this one comes through from Angela. Some really curly questions from everybody online, Marcos. Here we go from Angela. So, why would you say open source is more secure than traditional enterprise products? So, you did talk to security a fair bit in your talk track.
Yeah, this is a great question and allows me to actually go back and clarify. Maybe the way I spoke, it might be misleading, right? My point on the security side was really folks are embracing open source, but the trend around the need for extra security is not going away. Actually, it's becoming more relevant, right? So as you look into open source databases, security needs to be central, right? That was not to indicate that commercial databases are less secure. For the most part, they tend to be more secure just because there's less folks knowing what's in there, right? But the trend of adopting open source, it's here. It's here to stay. Considering that we need to focus around security on open source, right? That's really what I wanted to highlight on that slide. And hopefully that clarifies for you and for any other attendee.
Yeah, so is it more about putting the sort of guardrails up to sort of utilize the benefits of open source?
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that question, Angela. And then we've got a question here from Patrick, probably a bit more of a broader one. What's the standard time for transitioning a database over? When people are looking to sort of, move their database across, what's that look like? I mean, obviously it will change from project to project.
Yeah, I like this question is broad, so it allows me to cover a few things. And thanks, Patrick, for that. So I'm assuming the question is really trying to address. So when should we consider moving, right, or moving away from whatever technology we have now to something like FEP? And it varies from client to client, right? A lot of clients are now being pushed by their CIO, CTO organization to adopt and embrace hyperscalers because that's going to be the default platform for them. So that's a good timing to rethink your database strategy, right? It might not mean you're going to be using their flavor or database as a service, right? You could just use the infrastructure, like buy bare metal service or rent bare metal service in the cloud or rent virtual machines in the cloud and deploy a data FEP, for example, in there. There is another use case, which is the legacy databases, right? When is the right time to transition from a legacy database? That's a very hard question to answer, but it tends to be a cost equation, right? When it becomes too expensive to maintain the database versus the benefit the company can actually realize from that database. I think that's the trigger point. And that's interesting because that's one of the key reasons why folks start looking into Postgres, right? They usually want to move away from the legacy database. And that's when they get into researching about what are the options out there. And then they see a Postgres as a viable option, right?
Great. And Marcos, you brought up an interesting point about granular control with the new offering and just having a bit more control over so who's seeing and using the data. I was just interested to hear, like, what are sort of the typical configurations that you're hearing from customers around this? Like, what are some of the needs in this space, particularly given, I guess the height and level of data breaches? They've probably always been happening, but the more highly publicized and the risk that comes with that.
Yeah, so the granularity, I think it matters a lot because you can reduce the surface of attack, right? So you see a lot of the
Yep.
solutions out there in the market. They are focusing on transparent data encryption from a full database point of view, so with a full disk, and that has been available for quite a while, right? So there's a lot of storage devices out there that can be encrypted, a lot of file systems that can also be encrypted, but getting to the granular level of being able to encrypt an instance or a table in itself, I think that gives the extra ability to use different keys and segment who can access what. So it gives an extra level of control. Yes, it does increase a little bit of the complexity, but that's why you need to have enterprise tools to manage keys and rotate them and follow a robust cyber security protocol, right? Uh, and there are other things that not necessarily are tied to encryption, like data masking. A lot of clients use that to really segment who can see the data within the usage of the data. So if a developer is playing with some testing application, then they can mask that data set and not allow that developer to see the data. So all those use cases are valid, and more clients are looking at how they can actually get to that level of granularity. And we feel like we provide uh, the granularity to the level developers actually can segment completely the different key roles within the IT, right? So data DBAs, developers, security admins, for example.
Yeah, it's so important, isn't it? Just to to reduce your risk surface, threat surface, and then also the third party risk that comes in with that as well. I think we have a final question here, Nicholas. So yeah, this one came through as you were sort of answering the question around timing and transitioning. So probably a good follow up. What database do people start with, and what do you recommend? So you talked about sort of maybe legacy databases. What are you observing that people are sort of taking up? Is it the greenfield stuff or the stuff that's sort of been within businesses for 20 years?
Yeah, that definitely. I think there has been a shift. Like before, it was always like Oracle, DB2, right? But as things start to evolve over time, you saw a rise of things like MySQL, right? MySQL is still a big open source product. But now there's a big company behind it, controlling the community contributions and all of that. So it lost a little bit of popularity, and that's actually when Postgres was able to actually expand in terms of adoption, right? There's no right or wrong answer for this. Definitely, if you look at the trends, I would say Postgres is the right place to start if you're really looking into understanding relational database. But I understand a lot of folks are starting already in a cloud native type of environment, right? So they might be tempted to, well, I'm just going to use a known SQL. I don't need to worry too much about schemas, and that's it. Uh, my only recommendation there is be aware NoSQLs will not solve all the problems in IT, right? So there's still a place and there's still a need for relational databases, uh, and and they're not going away anytime soon. And one of the key ones is Postgres. So I would recommend you to take a look and start considering Postgres if you really want to start into this space.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much for that, Marcos. Um, Guys, for everybody online, we really appreciate the questions that are coming through sort of thick and fast throughout. So, really appreciate it. And I hope that Marcos got to cover off on all of the answers to your liking. But as he noted, feel free to reach out to the team. Marcos, any final sort of commentary around next steps and any final observations?
My final observation is really sign up for the next webinars if you're interested in this area. Keep an eye on what's happening around Postgres. It's definitely a trend that's here to stay. And I appreciate all of you that actually took time to join us. And even if you're watching this record, hopefully this was informative. And reach out to us if you have questions or you really want to go deep into a Postgres conversation.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much for that, Marcos. And I echo the thoughts as well. As always, we really appreciate you taking the time out. But there was a lot to take in today around sort of, the developments in this space. So we hope that it's helped to inform you and that you can, continue to connect with the Fujitsu Postgres team and Marcos and drive some real change within your business. So